My best friend, Lizzy Blake, suffered something terrible and later took her own life. But I made the unforgivable decision to hide the truth about who hurt her. Her mother once knelt before me, begging for answers, but I shut the door in her face. Even when the villagers came to confront me, I sent my dog to chase them away. 10 years later, as I lay dying in bed, my other best friend, Ivana Sinclair, returned to the village. She was now the wealthiest woman in the country, and she had come back seeking justice. The first thing she did was drag me onto a public memory trial stage like the ones used for criminals in ancient times. Selena, she said coldly, you heartless monster who shielded a criminal. Lizzy and I were blind to ever call you a friend. She's been gone for 10 years and you let the truth stay buried. Today I'll use the memory extractor I created to show everyone who you really protected. But when the real culprit's face appeared on the massive holographic screen, Iana's expression frozen. Shock. The stage she had arranged was enormous. The entire town square was packed. There was no space left to stunt. Reporters had cameras ready and a live stream broadcasted across every major platform. I was already dying. My organs were failing, yet they still dragged me out like a criminal. A man from the crowd grabbed my throat and shouted, Selena, why did you protect that person? You ruined our lives. He squeezed so hard that my vision went dark. The crowd roared with anger. What a cold-hearted woman, they shouted. Her friend suffered, and she stayed silent. The girl's mother begged her until her knees bled, and she still refused to open the door. All of their curses were aimed at me. Ivana stood nearby, her jaw tight, eyes filled with hate. Other than Liz's parents, no one despised me more than she did. 10 years ago, Lizzy, Anna, and I were inseparable. But after that night, everything fell apart. In her note, Lizzy wrote that I saw the man who hurt her. From that day, everyone believed I had protected him, and the truth was I did. Ivana stood in front of me, voice trembling with rage. Selena, this is your last chance. Tell us who it was, and turn yourself in. If not, once the machine starts, you won't be able to hide anything. I panicked. Ivana, I can't look into my memories. It's too late, she said, gripping my wrist. I'm getting justice for Lizzy. Tears streamed down my face. Ivana, please, don't do this. If you see everything, you'll regret it. She laughed bitterly. The only thing I regret is ever calling you my best friend. 2 guards forced me into a metal chair. Cold cuffs locked my wrists and ankles. A heavy helmet was placed on my head and countless tiny sensors pressed into my scalp. A flash of pain ran through me as the machine started. On the giant screen, my memories began to play in reverse. The first memory appeared 3 days after Liz's death. The villagers dragged me to her wake, demanding I reveal the culprit. Some spat on me, others threw stones. I ran away as they shouted and burned down my house. I was 16 then, alone, terrified. My dog Bruno was all I had left. On the stage, Ivana watched and laughed bitterly. Do you really think you deserve pity? You protected someone who destroyed lives. The crowd shouted in agreement. She has no shame, trying to use sad memories to make us feel sorry for her. But then another memory appeared. Lizzy alive, smiling, under falling snow. Catch this, Selena. She laughed, throwing a snowball. Her father collapsed in tears in front of the screen. Seeing her smile again after 10 long years broke him completely. The images changed again. A younger me knelt before a mountain shrine, praying, please bless my friends with happiness. May our friendship last forever. Ivana's voice trembled with anger. Liar, you pretended to care. You disgust me. The next clip showed me secretly discarding a mango Lizzy had given me. The crowd gasped. She's so fake, they yelled. Ivana stayed silent. She knew I was allergic, but she didn't explain. Keep going. Someone shouted. Show us the truth. The memories continued until the day they found Lizzy by the river. The rain poured heavily. Ivana and I fell beside her, crying, until our voices broke. I whispered, through sobs, Lizzy, how could you leave us on the stage? I closed my eyes as tears streamed down my cheeks. The crowd murmured. Even in their anger, some wavered. Then Liz's father spoke, voice trembling with grief. You don't know the pain we lived through. My wife begged at her door, and she never opened it once. His words reignited the crowd's fury. Ivana stepped forward, shaking. Selena, we cared for you when you had no one. Is This how you repay us? You destroyed Liz's life. She slapped me, her voice breaking. You killed her. Her pain cut through the air like a blade. Then she straightened, wiping her tears away. Her voice turned cold. I will find the one who hurt Lizzy. And when I do, both of you will pay. She ordered the machine to deepen the scan. Pain seared through my skull. The screen flickered rapidly, memories jumping from classrooms to forest to moments of laughter. But still no memory of the night at all happened. Why isn't it showing? People whispered. Ivana turned to her team. What's going on? One technician stammered. Missing Claire. She's resisting. She's blocking that memory. Ivana's eyes darkened. Still protecting that person even now? She glared at me, her voice trembling with fury. Who are you protecting, Selena? Who was it? The crowd kept buzzing, a low electric hum of anger and expectation. Ivana barked orders at her text while the giant screen kept flickering through safer memories, the small things that made up a childhood. Snow on laughter, a shared sandwich behind the school, a time the three of us painted a wooden boat and let it float downstream. Those moments made the square ache. They humanized us, and that made the absence of the worst night feel even heavier. People wanted an answer, and an answer was what Ivana had promised to give them. For a long moment, it seemed the machine had given up. The technicians fidgeted and whispered behind the glass, their faces pale in the glow of control panels. I realized with a cold clarity that they were worried about something other than the hardware. They were worried because I was resisting, or perhaps more accurately, because I had learned to resist a long time ago. A tech with a shaved head and nervous eyes stepped forward, apologizing into the microphone. He explained in bland, technical terms what my body had already told me when the helmet bit into my scalp. My mind had sealed that night away, not hidden, but folded into a place I could not reach by ordinary means. The extractor tugged and skimmed, but where it pulled there was empty white space or a seam of static. The red meter that measured recall rose and then fell again. The crowd hissed. Ivana snapped, her voice cutting through the murmur. Force it deeper. Override the safety protocols. Whatever it takes. A murmur of doubt ran through the technicians. Their leader hesitated. He glanced at me, and in that split second, I saw something like pity. Then he nodded because careers and loyalty and fear of Anna's wrath leaned him that way. The machine wound up, an ominous whine that made my teeth ache. The needles pressed deeper. Cold metal crept along my temples. The chair tightened, like a coffin closing. I saw flashes, not whole scenes. A hand reaching for a doorknob. Two shadows in the lane. The way the rain smelled the night the river took her. There was a memory. No, a memory of memory. Like a photograph that had been scorched at the edges. I could feel my chest tightening with the remembered pressure, my lungs refusing to cooperate. It was then, in the smallest corner of my mind, I found the shape of the bargain I had made. I had been 16 and terrified, not only of the men who prowled the edges of our lives, but of the consequences that came from crossing a certain family. There were names spoken with whisper and quick looks, and the kind of respectful fear that made you swallow hard. The man everyone respected had a son who would ruin anyone who spoke against him. My family had been poor and small. If anyone from that household decided to make trouble for us, the damage would be permanent. When you are young and hungry and bruised, a threat becomes a promise of ruin. I remembered the night in shards, the way the lantern in my kitchen had dipped, the footstep outside that did not belong to me, the baritone voice making a joke that was not a joke. I remembered the way he smiled like teeth over the shoulder of someone else. And then the demand that followed. It was not a single act of violence I recalled in detail, nor the type of cruelty that would describe itself plainly. It was the aftermath, the exchange that left me trembling and raw, with a choice. You heard me, he said, leaning close. Keep quiet or you and everything you love will be finished. He was not the sort of man to be ignored, and his family controlled the grocery stall and the landlord and the men who drove the delivery trucks. They could make the world tilt beneath your feet. So I had made a choice. I swallowed the truth because I believed silence might save others. I covered for him because he offered protection by threat, and because the wolves that came after me that winter were not only the villagers with torches. They were men in fine coats who could turn any rumor into a ruin. At 16, frightened and alone, I thought I was protecting the ones who could be hurt by the fall of a name. I thought I was buying time. I thought secrecy was a small, terrible price for survival. The machine tried to pull that bargain out and lay it bare. It reached the thin place where my memory was, stitched to my fear, where shame and logic had been sewn together into a single seam. The needles burned and the chair rattled. I squeezed my eyes shut until stars bloomed behind my lids. I begged Ivana, with the only language I had left, silence. Please, I mouthed. Please, Ivana. She did not answer me. Her jaw was a hard line. Her hands trembled, but the tremble was wrapped in a sheath of resolution. On the screen, the technician's voice started to falter, and a hush fell most of the square. Somewhere, a camera zoomed in on Anna's hand as it tightened around a cup of water. For a moment she seemed almost lost. Then the screen flicked and the face appeared. It was not what anyone expected. At first I thought the angle distorted it. The man looked older. In that frame, a formal portrait from a village hall, hair silvered at the temples, mouth set in an expression of civic benevolence. He had presided over festivals and given out charity at Christmas and been lauded at harvest dinners. He had been on the board that decided who received the small grants that kept some families afloat. For many, he was a pillar. For some, he was a patron. For Ivana, who had grown fiercely ambitious and who had, in the years since leaving the village, mocked the very structures that once sheltered her, this face was a private ghost. Ivana's expression dropped. Her hand slid from the cup. Her eyes lost focus. The microphone nearly fell from her hand. The assembled crowd shifted. A slow, terrible silence descended like a curtain. Is that him? Someone whispered, then louder. No, it can't be. The face on screen belonged to someone Ivana had smiled beside in childhood photos. He was a man who had once cut down the ribbon at the opening of the school where Ivana threw out crackers every New Year. He was a man whom I had thanked publicly when she came home to receive an award 10 years earlier. He was a man whose name was on a plaque at the town hall. He was, in short, part of the fabric of the place. I felt the words escape me without my permission. The memory the machine had finally managed to pull was not a single night, framed in naked brutality. It was a ledger of favors and debts, of whispered meetings in back rooms, of threats, disguised as advice. It showed the man we had all trusted bending a silvery smile over a private moment. It showed him the night Lizzy had walked by. It showed his shadow in the trees, but it did not show everything in the flat, clean way the crowd wanted. It suggested complicity but also showed the way power had been wielded to keep mouths shut, to shift blame, to create narratives that fit the powerful and crush the powerless. Ivana staggered back as if struck, her cheeks strained. Of color, she flung a steadying hand out, as if to hold the world in place. For the first time since she had climbed the stage, her voice broke, not with fury, but with something close to bewilderment. No, she said, very small. No, that can't be. The live stream began to spike with comments. People typed in reckless confidence and vow certainty toward whoever they thought had been protected. The mood in the square trembled between vengeance and disbelief. Some faces showed joy. Finally, the answer. Others were stunned, off balance. The man on the screen had given money to so many. He had hosted dinners with Ivana's family when they first struggled. He had been photographed with Ivana at a fundraising table, both of them laughing for the camera. For a woman who had built her fortune on defiance and brilliance, seeing her childhood benefactor implicated in the worst night of her life made something brittle inside her shift and crack. She yelled at the technicians to freeze the frame. Her fingers shook over the controls. She wanted his name. She wanted the narrative to be clean. Monster equals punishment. But real lives are messy. And the machine began to cough and throw up alternate angles. Pieces of a ledger, a receipt, a note tucked in a pocket, an escort at a dinner, a shadow that might have been him or might have been someone who wore his coat. The more the machine tried to make the night fit into a simple image, the more the truth resisted being pinned down like a specimen. In that moment I saw Ivana, not as the rich, unyielding woman who had returned to collect justice, but as a person who had grown up believing in certain certainties, a child who had been handed up to power like a prize and taught to trust it. She was not the only one stunned. The father of a boy I recognized from school staggered as if punched. A woman who had once been sweet to me in the market looked away, her mouth a thin line. Ivana turned to the crowd, and for a second there was no fire in her words, only a shaking plea. Did any of you ever think that the world is not made of black and white? That the people who smile at celebration can also hide a darkness? We trusted him because he held us together in small ways. But trust is no excuse. The square hummed with a new confusion. The anger did not disappear, but it splintered into doubt and fury and the first flickers of shame. If the man on the screen was indeed involved, then how many of those who now spat at me had eaten his bread? How many had benefited from his good graces? Had they all been so quick to judge when some of their hands were not clean either? Ivana's gaze snapped back. To me, there was still fury there. There was also now a raw, uncalculated question. Why did you protect him, Selena? She demanded. The helmet tightened. My voice came out then, broken with the trace of all the years I had swallowed my shame. I thought it would keep others safe, I said. I thought I could trade a secret for quiet. I was a child, Ivana. She laughed. Then, a sound that might have been pity or horror. You were not just a child, she said. You were a coward. Her words landed like stones. The crowd surged. Again. Some cheered her for naming me. Some recoiled at her cruelty. Ivana's hands trembled again, and she lifted her face to the sky, as if asking something vast and unknowable. Then she stamped down the motion. Find him, she ordered. The lead technician, voice like a blade. Every angle, every ledger, every receipt. If he is alive, I will find him. And if he is dead, then I will find who covered for him. The machine growled and stuttered, and for a few wild seconds, the memory extraction algorithm produced things no one wanted. Legal documents with a signature that might have been his. A photograph of him, with local officials, a blacked-out file, stamped confidential. None of it fit neatly into the story that had begun in the square. The crowd grew fractious. A group began to chant, half accusation, half plea. Tell us his name. Ivana's face hardened. She dragged a breath into her lungs as if readying herself for a battle. She had come back with a plan, with resources and influence, and a machine that could pry into the most private places. But the machine, like truth, refused to conform. Power could reveal some things, but it could not manufacture the clarity that grief demands. I felt my strength ebb. The oxygen in my chest felt thin, and my pulse stuttered against the cuffs. I had tried to keep a dangerous secret for what I had convinced myself were noble reasons. Now the small private bargains of my youth were being played out on a public stage with a crowd eager for a simple resolution that would not appear. I wanted to shout at them, to tell them how small we were when we tried to hold the world in our palms. I wanted to tell them that sometimes protection is not heroism, and that silence is not always salvation. But the chair held me. The helmet hummed. Ivana, with her sudden look of fatigue that belonged to someone who had carried a different kind of burden, turned and called for a pause. The technicians obliged, but the pause was only a momentary lull before whatever would come next, as Hans in the crowd lifted their phones and recorded everything as streamers flashed the frame across continents, and the hashtag started to climb. Ivana walked to the edge of the stage and stood before me so close I could see the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes. She reached for my face, not to touch, but to measure what remained of the girl she had once known. Selena, she whispered so low only I could hear. If what you say is true, then explain to me why you thought silence would save anyone. Tell me everything, and maybe, just maybe, there will be room left for the truth to breathe. I looked up at her in the flood of memories that were not mine, but had become mine, and for the first time in 10 years I tried to speak the whole of it. My voice was a cracked thing. The crowd leaned in as if sound alone could mend the ragged edges of their hurt. Ivana nodded, silent, submitting to the slow, difficult act of listening. But as I began to give shape to the worst of that winter, to the bargains and threats and the small betrayals that had stacked until they formed a wall, a shout rose from the back of the square. A voice rough with age called out a name, one that made the air go cold. The man at the back shouted, again with more certainty this time. You are all fools, he said. Do you not see? They're trying to bury him in a memory that isn't hers to give. The person who put us here is closer than you think. We are looking at a face, but not the whole thing. He is being used as a shield. The words opened an ugly seam in the square. People clustered and argued. The live stream comments volley between confirmation and conspiracy. Ivana's eyes narrowed. She looked from the screamed to me, and for a second I thought she might finally forgive me, or at least understand. Then she stepped back, and the crowd roared again, impatient for a clean end. The helmet's hum rose once more. The technicians exchanged worried looks. The machine had already pushed more than anyone mind should bear, and yet no one knew whether the next pull would give clarity or ruin. Ivana squared her shoulders against the wind. She had the look of a woman about to cross a line she could not uncross.
Do it, she said.
Expose it all. I wanted to tell her to stop. I wanted to tell her that some things once exposed do not make anything right. I wanted to tell her that truth is not always a save.
But
the words would not come.
The chair
tightened, the helmet settled, and the needle of the machine began its slow, implacable climb. And as it did, the sky above the square began to bruise with the first slow rolls of storm cloud, as if the weather itself were turning into witness the reckoning.
The storm that
had been threatening all evening finally
broke.
Thunder cracked over the village square, and the live stream cameras shook in their mounts as wind rushed through the crowd. The storm light flashed across Anna's pale face, and for a moment she looked more ghost than human, the avenger, the friend, the child still grieving. 10 years later, the machine reached its maximum frequency. The red indicator pulsed violently, and the technicians shouted warnings that no one heard. The crowd leaned forward, desperate for an ending. Any ending. My heartbeat slowed into the rhythm of a hum. In a flash of lightning, I saw Liz's smile again.
I
saw us at 14 barefoot in the stream, laughing as we caught minnows in our hands. I saw the day Ivana arrived at school with her shoes torn, and I gave her mine. I saw the way Liz's laughter always came first. How she believed goodness could heal anything. And then, finally, the last sealed door in my memory opened. It wasn't the mayor. It wasn't any of the powerful men the village feared. The person who hurt Lizzy had been someone no one ever suspected. Someone the whole village trusted. A teacher.
The same man who had
encouraged Ivana to apply for her
scholarship.
The man who praised Liz's poems in the town paper. The man who lived next door to me when my parents died, and who used to bring me food so I wouldn't starve. He had been kind, too. Kind, the kind that hides a shadow.
That
night, Lizzy had run to me, terrified
and shaking.
I remember her voice breaking as she told me what had happened. I remember holding her, promising that no one would hurt her again. And then as dawn came, he arrived at my door. He didn't threaten me with violence. He did worse. He begged. He said he would be destroyed if the truth came out, that his sick wife would die
from shame,
that Lizzy would be blamed for seducing him because of the way gossip worked in villages like ours. He said if I stayed silent, he'd pay for Liz's studies, for my medicine, for our future. And I believed him. I was 16, afraid, and convinced that silence could save someone. But silence only kills. Slower. On the stage, the images poured out of the machine in a cascade. Every word, every tear, every night I spent haunted by that bargain. The crowd saw it all. They saw how I had been manipulated, how my silence was born of fear, not cruelty. They saw that the man everyone admired had built his reputation on stolen innocence. The square fell silent. Then from the back of the crowd, someone screamed. An elderly woman, the teacher's wife, collapsed into the mud, sobbing. Her son tried to help her up, but she pushed him away, crying that she'd known, that she had always known and never dared to
speak.
The truth spread through the people like lightning through a dry
field.
Ivana stared at the screen, speechless. The rain plastered her hair to her face, and her shoulders trembled. She turned toward me, her voice barely more than a whisper. It wasn't power you protected, she said. It was guilt.
I couldn't answer.
My strength was gone, and my breath came in shallow bursts. I felt the warmth of blood trickling from under the helmet, mingling with the
rain.
Turn it off, one of the technicians yelled. Her vitals are collapsing. But Ivana didn't move. Her eyes were locked on mine, full of tears and confusion, something that looked almost like regret. Then she finally nodded, and the machine powered down with a long dying sigh. The cuffs released, and I slumped forward. The world tilted sideways, colors fading into gray. I could hear people crying, not for me, but for the ruin of everything they thought they knew. Ivana knelt beside me, her expensive dress sinking into the
mud.
She held my face with trembling hands. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. We could have faced it together. I tried to smile, But it came. Outbroken. Because I murmured back then. I thought friendship was something you protected with lies, not truth. Her tears fell onto my cheek, warm even in the cold rain. I wanted justice, she
Said.
but all I found was another kind of pain. The villagers watched in silence as she cradled me.
Someone in.
The crowd shouted that the police were already on their way to the teacher's
House.
others cried. For the first time in 10 years, the hatred aimed at me seemed to dissolve into shame and disbelief. I looked past Ivana toward the holographic screen. Liz's smiling face had returned. Her last recorded memory. Her laughter echoed softly through the speakers, blending with the thunder and the wind. I'm sorry, I whispered to her image, for everything I couldn't say. Ivana looked up at the same screen, and for the first time, she spoke to Lizzy too. We found it, she said through tears. We found the truth. The screen flickered once more, and then went dark. The storm began to
Ease.
reporters, drenched in trembling, lowered their cameras. The square was filled not with anger anymore, but with something heavier, silence, the kind that carries both grief and release. Ivana's hand stayed on mine until the paramedics arrived. I could hear her voice fading in and out as she gave orders, telling them to be careful, telling them I wasn't the villain everyone thought I was, but I already knew I wouldn't make it through the
Night.
The truth had cost me everything. Yet it was the first time in 10 years that I felt peace.
As they lifted me
Onto the stretcher, I whispered, Ivana, take care of her parents. I will, she said, choking on the words. I promise. I looked up at the gray sky. The storm clouds parted just enough for a sliver of moonlight to fall across Liz's photo on the darkened screen. For a moment I imagined she was smiling at both of us, not with anger, but with forgiveness. And then, with that final image fixed in my mind, I closed my eyes.
2 weeks.
Later, the news spread across the nation. Respected teacher arrested in decade-old case after memory extraction. Evidence surfaces. The investigation revealed a network of cover-ups that reached deep into the village. Administration. Ivana used her fortune to rebuild what had been destroyed.
A
Scholarship in Liz's name, a shelter for girls who had no voice, and a small memorial garden in the woods near the river. At the edge of that garden there is a single stone.
carved into it are
Only 3 words: truth, love, forgiveness. Every year on that day, Ivana visits and leaves 3 white leaves. One for Lizzy, one for me, and one for the truth that finally set us
free.